Have you developed any other resin formulas for any other kinds of parts? And if you have, what's the process for that? Is it just the properties the part needs to have?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is like some of the stuff on Facebook, it kind of cracks me up. Somebody's like, yeah, I'm new to resin printing or I'm new to printing and what printer should I get, right? We've seen those questions.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, you should get a Ender 3, or hey, you should get this, or hey, you should get that, or you should get a Prusa SL1, or you should get this. And I'm like, you don't even know what the person wants to do, right? You're not even asking the right questions first. And so I always ask them when I talk to clients or anybody I'm guiding online, what's it going to do? What the type of environment it's going to be in? Is it going to be around any chemicals? Just what does this thing have to live with or deal with or do? And sometimes they're like, well, I didn't think about that. I'm like, well, go back and think about it and let me know. Because I'm like, hey, if it's going to be, as an example, an interior car part for like a dash or something else, people are like, oh, I printed it in PLA. And I'm like, hey, good luck with that if you live in Arizona and it's the middle of summer.
Yeah.
Because you're going to come on down and find a blob, right? Whatever it is. So it's kind of stuff like that is if you don't know what the intended end use for the part is, functional parts, right? Characters are one thing. But if it's an end-use functional part, if you don't know the environment or how it's going to be used, if it's going to be touched, if it's going to be mechanic, there's going to be, machine tools that are going to be on it, sockets or wrenches or whatever. If it's part of a bigger assembly, if you don't understand how any of the uses are, and you don't ask, 25 or 30 different questions, how can you even begin to design the part?
Right.
And it kind of drives me nuts because there's so many people that are online like, yeah, I'll design the part. And it's like, yeah, you're going to stick your name on it. And if I was a client, I'm going to pay you, $100 to design me a part. And how am you going to guarantee that the part's going to meet my needs, right?
Right.
That's my big thing is my reputation. And that's why I don't advertise. It's all word of mouth because people know that when they get a part from me, that it's going to work. I've got parts that are on cars, drag cars that are 1,600 horsepower, 2,000 horsepower. I've got road course cars, time attack cars, cars that are on Pikes Peak. Rally cars are in Europe,
So did you set up...
My parts are in those cars.
Did you set up a separate business for that? Like you have your own brand or is it your name or...
No, it's just literally my name. I didn't set up a separate brand. Ironically enough, is I have a background in creating startups.
Oh, okay.
And so I've had 3 tech startups and creating brands and putting brands together. I know the whole process.
Uh-huh.
And this intentionally, I was like, nope, because what I wanted these guys within this industry. I'm a big car guy.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were like, hey, we want this part rapidly designed. I want somebody to look at somebody else and go, hey, go talk to Tony, right? Tony, call this guy. Here's this number. Yeah, he's in the U.S. or whatever, but you can catch him at 3 a.m.
Right.
I've had calls at 3 a.m. I went to bed this morning at 4:30 and got up at 9:12, and that's my day.
So it's almost like a personal brand for you.
Yeah, it's kind of a personal brand that honestly nobody knows about,
right.
Which is actually perfectly okay because if you're in the know, then great, you're in the know, right?
Right.
You talk to somebody because I look at it this way too: is if somebody tells you to call me, it means you've talked to somebody else that has my parts. Which means that they're vouched for it. They're like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's gone through this process, blah, 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 blah. I don't, in a sense, have to say all that again. They might ask what the process is, but I've had guys who are like, hey, man, you did this stuff for Doug? Yeah. Oh, he's sung your praises, and he's got 25 of your parts, and blah, 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 and they've got them on a shelf, or they're in a truck ready to go. Yeah, we're looking for this. Okay.
So they're already pre-qualified pretty much as buyers then at that point.
Yeah.
So
because when they're calling me, if I haven't designed a part for them, if it's brand new, and then in some cases, this part actually has the company name on the part. I'll actually emboss it in here.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a guy's like, hey, I saw that part, can I get it? What I'll do is out of courtesy is I'll call this guy up or I'll email him and I'm like, hey, this other guy wants this part. Is it okay if he gets it? And the guy might go, yeah, it's okay. And I'm like, is it okay for him to have a logo on it or not? Right? If he's like, no, then I'll go back to the second guy and I'm like, hey, I originally designed it for the first guy, but guess what? He's just asked, you can have the part, but he's asked that I don't embed your logo into it. And a lot of times they're like, all right, yeah, that's cool. If it's a part that you need that even though I've come up with the design, but if it's for a specific application, yeah, send me your logo. I'll embed your logo into it. It's not a problem. It's still not your design, right? It's just your logo embedded into my design concept.
Right.
And that's what a lot of the companies don't realize is they're paying for my time and effort and they're paying for my design, but they don't actually own the design. I do.
Right. So are you using the Mars, the regular Mars, or Mars Pro on these?
I'm using the regular Mars.
Okay. Have you run across any issues with a difference in parts that are printed in the center as opposed to on the edges?
Not really. I mean, some of the parts I've done have been pretty large. I mean, it's kind of funny. I forgot I had these over here. These are parts that are used as, yeah, I mean, this is, so you can see it's pretty big in my hand, right? So it's pretty thick too.
Yeah.
So this part was designed for a Cadillac, a CTS-V, one on each side for an air intake. And it's just a sandwich plate. This is a 100% solid part. I've taken these outside and thrown them up 30 or 40 feet and let them bounce all over the ground, and they don't shatter, right? There's one, I think, that shattered because I was literally like slamming it into the ground, right, to try and do that. These were all done on the Mars.
Is that the same mix, the same resin mix?
Yeah, what I'll do is I will adjust the resin mix based on what the need is. So if it's going to be somewhere where it's going to be closer to a lot more heat, I'll leave more of like I use Resin, the TR250, because it has a high temp deflection. Mm-hmm. I'll leave more of that there because if I mix too much of, say, the Tenacious D, which makes it not brittle, or if I mix too much of the blue into it, it'll reduce the temperature deflection to, say, 300 degrees. But if I know that I'm going to be, hey, my temperature deflection has to be 200 degrees, I don't want it to be just 250. I want it to be like way above that, right? To make sure it's okay. But I mean, to give you an example, I mean, these parts is, I mean, people would argue with me that they would, these are printed parts, but these are solid parts.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere. A matter of fact, to prove to the client that these would work, I actually went out in my garage and took the car that I'm working on, which was on jack stands at the time, and I put these one underneath each tire, and the car is 3,300 pounds, and let it down, and these supported the car.
Wow.
One on each corner, and they weren't even bending at all. There was no deflection. You cannot take this in your hand and crush it.
So
ironically enough, I made these, and then the client didn't want them.
Oh. So the TR250, that's for heat, pretty much for heat, and then you've got Tenacious. Is that for strength?
Yeah, that's for. So for the Siraya Tech, the Tenacious. This is actually used because it's more pliable. It wouldn't resist to the heat. So you need to sit there and go, okay, once again, knowing the environment and how the part's going to be used, right? Okay, I need a part that's strong. I need a part that'll last to high heat, but I don't need it to be brittle. Because the higher the temperature that the resins go, the more brittle they become. So the thing is you need to then almost in a sense cut that brittleness with a resin that doesn't last the high heat, but then it's not brittle, right? So when you mix the two together, once they molecularly bond, you get what you actually need in the end.
And then the blue, what does the blue do for you?
The blue is if I want a part that's really tough and is going to hold like threads. Like these ones don't, there's no threads to them except for just in here. And that's not really super critical, right? Because that thread just needs to hold a really small nozzle. And that's it. There's nothing, it's not holding any strength. But the blue, actually, this nut needs to compress and hold the force pulling away from it as I'm trying to compress it down, right? So there's a force that's acting this direction on this nut. And I need to ensure that this nut's going to hold. And it actually doesn't, it's kind of funny. I printed these one day just for the client, and I printed this bung. I sent them, I should have kept one, but I sent them all to him. That were both in blue, just so he can actually give them his handaways, his give-outs to people. And he would keep a bunch of them in his pocket, and he's like, yeah, check this out. And he would give them to people, and the threads work. But I needed it to hold, so what I'll do is I'll mix, you'll mix the frozen TR250, so the high temp. You'll mix the Tenacious, so you have the non-brittle. And then I'll mix the blue, and the blue allows you to get finer details and so it'll hold threads.
Okay.
You can take these two parts, and I honestly didn't believe it the first time I tried it, but I took the male and the female, I took them right off the build plate after they were cured, and I put them together, and I was like, they're going to bind up, they're not going to work. And I went like this, and I went, and just spun it with my finger. And there was some resistance, which I was actually happy about, because I wanted it to kind of grip into each other. Because in a car environment where it vibrates, I didn't want it to back out.
Right.
And I didn't want them to have to use like Loctite or anything to kind of keep the nut there. So when you're putting it on, there actually is some resistance to it, and that actually just works out better.
What about your curing process? Do you do anything special to cure these resins?
No, not than what anybody else does. I built a curing chamber, which was actually from Amazon, which was like a 16 by 16 or 18 by 18 photo cube. And I put a pedestal in the middle of it. I got the rope lights and put them all on the inside. The one thing that I'm a huge advocate in doing, though, is I use acetone purely. I do not use anything else besides acetone. And I'll leave everything on the build plate. So when I grab something, when I pull it off, I'm literally touching. It kind of cracks me up when people freak out about resin, right? But I grab it like this, and I literally, once it's been sitting there, almost sometimes all night, there's no resin that's going to drip off. So I'll grab it like this, and I'll turn it over. I've got the parts, and I'll take the whole thing, and I've got a vat of acetone, and I just swish the entire thing until it just submerges to here. And it's like less than a minute, and I pull it up, no resin at all on the build plate, on either side, or on the part.
And you don't use...
I don't have to worry about parts, fusing together or anything.
You don't use a ultrasonic cleaner or anything like that. You just dip it in the acetone, it takes it all off.
Yeah, acetone, see, the acetone's a solvent, right? And people are like, oh, it's going to eat the part. No, it's not, because it's partially cured already just from actually the printing process, right? So if you were to drop liquid resin into acetone, yeah, you'll watch it kind of dissolve.
Mm-hmm.
But I've literally had supports that broke away inside of the vat where the acetone was,
mm-hmm.
and came back 3 weeks later. Those were uncured parts. You went from the printer into the acetone,
mm-hmm.
and came back 3 weeks later, and they were still floating around in the bottom of the vat. They were still supports. It had not eaten them away. It didn't change them. That was 100% acetone.
Do you do anything special to get the supports off? Like a lot of people kind of like rinse it in warm water. Or...
No. I just turn around and I'm like, all right, I've rinsed it off, and I'll turn around. Depends on what the part is, if it's really complex. But I'll turn around and just break it away. But I mean, I've also printed what other people, not for these functional parts, but when I first got the printers just to play around, I've printed a 1 micron, which, I mean, people have, or 10 micron, which people have not tried. They're just like,
right.
Oh, it can't go that low. Well, and you've seen hundreds of these. But
oh, yeah.
It can go that low because this is printed at the lowest setting on the slicer that it'll possibly go, and the printer will do it.
Oh, wow.
So in the alien's mouth, you can actually see his teeth and see the tongue on the inside, and they're super, super, super fine, right? I even, for some of the parts that I made, got and I would suggest anybody who does functional parts to do this, is I got this, which is a digital microscope. You hook it up either to your computer or directly to your phone. And this one does 1,000 zoom, right? So 1,000x. And you can put that on your part and take a look at it and get super, if you want to know exactly what happened, for me, I do. It might be kind of geeky, but it's like I said, these parts are functional, which is pretty much all I print.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to know that when I send that part to a client, that my name's on it, that when he talks to somebody else, he doesn't sit there and go, oh, those parts were crap. That he's like, no, those parts rocked. They did exactly what he said they were going to do. I saw the video. I tested it. They have those as well for their own, they can download all that stuff. So they take a look at it. If somebody else later on comes on, I've had team managers come back and go, hey, you designed that part a couple of weeks ago. What exactly did you do? And I'm like, oh, here's all the assets. Go take a look.
Wow. What about orientation on the build plate? Do you have any special rules for that?
I've played a lot with orientations on the build plate, and the rough part is kind of 3 things. Maximizing, of course, the quality of the part when it comes out. Maximizing the amount of time and the number of items I can put on a build plate. and then the orientation as far as is it going to print perfectly, right?
Right.
To give you an example, this simple little nut is, a lot of people would print this and they wouldn't print it vertically on the build plate. They would print it at an angle, right? That's the wrong way to print this. The actual way to print it is completely vertically or perpendicular to the plate.
Is it because of the threads?
It's because of the threads, exactly.
Right.
Because if you do threads and you print threads this way, they'll come out perfect. If you print them this way, they actually come out screwed up.
Right.
And when you try and thread it into another item that mates with it perfectly or any other way, the threads bind. And because the threads are printing so perfectly, in most mechanical threads, you'll see is that there's a small, like 0.5 millimeter bevel or chamfer on the inside to get the thread started to the next one. These don't have that. So it's literally just a straight edge to a straight edge that's mating. If you don't thread it correctly or you don't get this correct and it doesn't hold the thread, they won't screw into each other, right? So you can actually take these and print them just like this on the build plate. Now, if I sell these individually, which I have done before because they just needed them, these are roughly like $12 each. And there's roughly like 6 cents worth of resin in this part, right? But I can print 21 of them on the build plate in the same 6.5 hours. So when the client calls and I'm like, yeah, how many do you need? And he's like, well, I need 6. And I'm like, why don't you just buy 21 of them at once and you don't have to call me for a while? Well, why not? It maximizes my throughput because now from a business standpoint, that build plate literally generates me a couple $100. It's a great feeling, man, when you take this build plate.
Oh yeah.
And you got 21 of these things right there, and you're like, I literally just printed money, right? It's just sitting there, and they're just all lined up in a rack.
Well, that's really cool. Those nuts are actually, they look like it could be jewelry. Pretty cool looking.
Yeah, these ones are just, like I said, these are functional as well, but they're just really cosmetic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't put this in an engine bay just because it would look kind of weird. But if you wanted to, you could.
So how much would you say how much extra money do you make working at this part-time as a side gig? Like how much time do you put into it per week if you were to spread it out over the year? And what do you say, what percentage would you increase your income, would you say, from doing this?
Since the beginning of the year till now, probably 80 or 90K.
Wow, that's really awesome for a side gig.
Yeah, and I put in, and that's just so far. I mean, last year it was over that. It was close to 200.
Right.
And then I would probably say amount of work-wise, the printing's the easy part. It's all the stuff that's up front. Realistically, to design this bung and this nut together might take me all of maybe a week.
Did you do the design work on your own time, or do you charge the clients for that?
No, the clients pay an upfront fee.
Oh, okay.
So it's like I look at it and I might designing it, as an example. We might right now say, hey, Tony, I want this part. And I'm designing it, sketching, and I throw it in front of you. And I don't account for that. But it's like, okay, when I start really getting into the CAD and I start getting into the engineering and really thinking about how it's got to be used, the environment, the vibrations, is it going to be near hot parts? Is it going to be interchanged a lot? Does it have to be touched? When I have to put a lot of brain power into it, that's what I'm charging you for. I'm charging you for that expertise that I bring to the table, right? And these guys within the automotive race teams and motorsports, they expect it.
And then so after you're done designing something for somebody, you own that intellectual property?
Yeah.
And do you have to make a contract for them that says that you own that?
Yeah, there's
property?
An agreement that goes out that they sign to and stuff. And then it's a different story if they're like, I've had them ask, well, hey, can I buy it exclusively? Well, yeah, you can, but then I'm going to charge you a lot for this, for this one little part. Because I'm like, look, it's more cost effective for me to charge you $4,000 up front for the design and the engineering of the part to get exactly what you want, and charge you $38 every time that you want one.
Right.
Versus you taking this exclusively and then me giving you the STL file, right, and all the analysis and everything behind it, and kind of giving you the whole thing and saying, okay, well, that's going to be 15 grand, right?
Has anybody ever taken you up on that, where they wanted to just buy the whole thing?
No, because a lot of times they're just like, you know what? They're like, hey, you keep it. We'll just, when we need a part, we'll order it. And that's, to me, that's the best thing, because everything's done. I just got to take out I literally have the files. Once I printed it the first time and I've set it up on the build plate the right way, I save the file.
Oh, yeah.
So if they turn around and they're like, hey, we need 20 more of those parts, I'm like, sure, no problem. It'll take a couple of days. So,
it's already on the SD card. You just like shoot it out.
Pretty much. And within 5 minutes of the call, I've got the resin set up and I'm like, all right, it's good. It's printing.
That's pretty cool.
Because I have 4 printers, I can now spread the job across, right? So if they're like, hey, I want 20 parts, I'm like, all right, I can do and they all spit them out super quick. Now it's just less than a day's worth of work.
That's really cool. All right, do you have any advice for anyone who's interested in doing 3D printing as a business? Anything that you've learned that you could share with people?
Do something that nobody else is doing, right? So I see it on forums and groups all the time, and they're just like, people just want to buy a printer, print parts, and go. And I'm like, no, that's not the way you show added value, right? That's not the value. And if you can't bring the additional value, then maybe you got to figure out how to do it, because printing is a commodity. It really is. When you've got now the Elegoo Saturn that just came out, the large format printer, and that printer itself was $500. Right?
Did you get one?
I didn't get one, and there's a reason why. Is behind me, sitting on the floor, is not a lot of people know about it, but I have the makings and the LCD of 4K. It's a 4K monochrome LCD display for a 23-inch screen. So it'll be, in a sense, not the first. There's another one that's out there, but it's about 20 grand to start. But it'll be a large format resin printer.
So are you building that from scratch?
Yeah, I'm designing my own printer.
Wow, we have to talk about that.